Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive into this YouTube video
Okay.
from the Andrew A.J. Johnson channel.
Mm-hmm.
And the title is a little bit provocative.
All right.
We live in a society of contemptible people.
Oh, wow.
So I've got the transcript right here.
Okay.
And I guess our mission for this deep dive is to really get to the heart of what he's saying about how we're all living.
Yeah, those bold statements often stop us in our tracks and make us think.
Right.
So what is it that's really at the core of what he's driving at here?
Well,
What's his concern?
He mentions this idea has been brewing for years for him, and he usually talks about, empathy, listening, patience, all those good things.
Right.
But he's like, those words just aren't strong enough to capture what he's really worried about.
So there's a real sense of unease there.
Yeah.
That the normal way we talk about how to get along with each other just isn't adequate anymore.
Right.
There's something deeper going on.
Yeah. And the word he lands on is contemptible. And he's quick to say, I understand words in a slightly different way than maybe other people holding multiple meanings at the same time.
Okay.
But for him, contemptible is describing a society where we're increasingly just accepting these higher levels of disrespect, indecency, even inhumane treatment towards each other. And so I'm curious, how does that resonate with what you see in the world around you?
Well, that idea of acceptance is really key because it's not just that there are people out there behaving badly.
Right.
It's that as a society, we're starting to just normalize these things and just come to expect them.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. And then he brings up technology.
Okay.
Specifically smart technology, as something that he thinks has actually amplified this.
Okay.
That it's contributing to a society that's not just contemptible,
Uh-huh.
but also mean and cruel.
Yeah, that may, the kinds of things that people feel free to say.
Right. And he then starts giving examples of this acceptance.
Yeah.
And he mentions the growing acceptance of bullying in adult life.
Right.
Like that's a thing now.
It's not just for kids anymore.
It's not just for kids anymore.
Yeah.
And he also talks about a concerning lack of real worry around violence towards children,
Yeah.
animals, nature, and even objects.
Oh, interesting.
And he even says that might seem weird to some people, like being concerned about someone slamming a door.
So he's seeing a common thread through all of that. Like the way we treat a door is kind of a symptom of the way we treat each other in a way. I mean, obviously there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
But that lack of consideration seems to run through everything.
Yeah. And he emphasizes that this isn't a new observation for him.
Uh-huh.
He feels this negative trend has been getting worse year after year for as long as he can remember.
So that kind of paints a pessimistic picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A long downward slide.
Yeah, it does.
I wonder what kind of specific things he's seen that have led him to this conclusion.
Right. And then he's like, is he just being negative?
Right.
Is he being an Eeyore?
Yeah.
And he addresses that.
Right.
He's like, some of you just want to escape into entertainment, watch remakes, watch sports.
Sure.
And he says there's nothing wrong with those things inherently.
Right.
But he's like, do they really help us deal with the societal issues that he's talking about?
Well, it's that balance, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, we need a break sometimes.
Right.
We need to relax and enjoy things.
Right.
But are we just using those things to avoid thinking about the hard stuff?
Exactly.
The real problems?
And this leads him to something that I think he feels really strongly about.
Okay.
Which is calling things by their real names. Like if something is stressful, call it stressful.
Yeah.
If a situation is overwhelming, maybe it's actually traumatic.
Right.
And he believes that generally speaking, the current state of the world is not normal.
So the language we use really matters here.
Yeah.
Because if we're always downplaying serious issues, then we're not going to actually deal with them properly.
Yeah.
We need to be honest about how bad things are sometimes.
And then he brings up a really relevant concern, which is the influence of extremist groups on people's lives. And the tendency to just kind of passively accept that as okay. And he strongly disagrees with that.
Yeah, that's a tough one because those extremist viewpoints can spread really easily.
Right.
And it's like, well, am I really going to stand up and say something? Am I going to put myself out there?
Right.
But he's saying we have to.
We have to.
Yeah, we can't just let those ideas become normal.
Right.
We have to challenge them.
Right. And so that's really the core of his message.
Okay.
This feeling of a growing contempt in society, possibly made worse by technology, a wider acceptance of negative behaviors, and specific worries about things like bullying and the pull of extremist groups.
It's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is.
He's really urging us to look at what's happening.
Yeah.
And think about whether we've become too tolerant of bad behavior.
Right.
That is just dragging us all down.
Yeah, and then he gets to that question of what can we do about it?
Okay.
And he points out, we already have ways to participate, right?
Yeah.
We have voting, we have, social media to express ourselves, we have getting involved in our communities and learning about politics.
Right, all the usual stuff.
Yeah.
But if he's bringing it up, it must be because he thinks it's not enough.
Exactly.
Like he's frustrated that those things aren't working.
He's like, these previously offered solutions just haven't worked.
And
he's not trying to repeat, the usual advice about individual self-improvement.
Okay.
Or setting a good example.
Right.
Like he's like, this is a bigger problem.
It's a systemic problem. It's not just about individuals. It's about the whole structure of things.
Exactly. And so his main goal, he says, is not to provide all the answers, but really to shine a light on this contemptible society.
Okay.
He's like, even if other people are discussing it,
Yeah.
he feels his take is a little bit different. And he even mentions wanting to use stronger language.
Oh, really?
But holding back a little bit.
So that means he's really concerned about this.
Right.
Like he feels very strongly about it.
Yeah, and he comes back to the impact of this contempt, reiterating the meanness and the cruelty that he sees. And he makes an interesting point.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not even a smart way to operate.
Yeah.
Not just morally wrong,
Yeah.
but almost strategically flawed.
Right, because a society that is built on contempt can't actually function properly.
Right.
We need to be able to cooperate and respect each other.
And so then he's like, all right, here's a call to action of sorts.
Right.
And he's like, think about why you might choose to be contemptible. Like if you have a choice.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't be passive. Don't let yourself be pushed around.
Right.
And instead advocate for, supporting and lifting each other up.
So he's really emphasizing that we have agency here, that we can choose to behave differently.
Right. And then he makes a connection between, all this conflict between individuals and the larger systemic problems like corporations and failing institutions.
Right.
And he's like, when we're all fighting amongst ourselves,
Yeah.
it actually benefits those who are causing the bigger issues.
It's divide and conquer.
Right.
Keep everybody squabbling with each other.
Yeah.
So they don't notice the real problems.
Yeah. And he expresses a hope that we can learn to be more supportive of each other in the present moment, rather than just looking back and wishing we had been.
That's a good point.
Right.
Sometimes it's too late.
Right.
And that support isn't there when someone really needs it.
Right.
But if we can be there for each other in real time, it makes a huge difference. Right.
Right. And then he also touches on the value of learning about history in different cultures.
Yeah.
And practicing humility, acknowledging what we don't know.
I think that's really important because a lot of this contempt comes from just ignorance or a lack of empathy for people who are different from us. So if we can educate ourselves and really be humble about what we don't know, then it's going to be much harder to be contemptuous.
Right. And then he uses this really relatable analogy. He's like reducing your soda consumption.
Oh,
He's like, that's how big change often happens in small steps.
Small steps.
It's about quieting those negative thoughts and trying to lessen the harm rather than expecting, this instant perfect solution.
So what's your soda reduction?
Right.
What's that one little thing you can change?
Right.
That's going to make a difference.
Yeah. And then he's like, even with the serious nature of the topic, he's like, I'm an idealist. And he uses dark humor to cope. But he knows it might not land with everyone.
Yeah.
But he does see this potentially dangerous path ahead.
Yeah, I think humor can be really important.
Yeah.
When we're dealing with these kinds of issues because it helps us process things.
Yeah.
And it can create a sense of community.
Right.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah. And then he gets really personal.
Okay.
Sharing his own experiences of feeling like an outsider for being himself and his commitment as an artist to reflect what he sees in society.
Right.
And he embraces his imperfections and he values, being accountable and self-reflective.
That's really powerful because it makes him more relatable.
Yeah.
He's not just preaching from on high. He's saying, hey, I struggle with this too.
Right.
We're all in this together.
And he ends by coming back to his main point. This normalization of negativity and bullying is something that he believes nobody really likes.
Right.
And is ultimately not helpful.
It's not good for anyone.
Right. And he asks why we seem to be moving away from, basic values like respect and dignity.
Right.
And he even mentions the words, I love you.
Yeah.
Like, those words have power.
They do.
And he hopes we can find a more humane way forward.
So he's reminding us of what's important.
Yeah.
Those basic human values that we all share.
Right.
And that we need to hold on to if we want to create a better world.
So it's a lot to think about.
It is. He's really challenging us to examine our own behavior and see how we might be contributing to this problem, even in small ways.
Right. And then he's like, what's that small step that you can take today to move towards greater respect and empathy?
Right. What's your soda reduction? Yeah. What can you cut back on in your own life?
Yeah. So that's our challenge to you.
Okay.
From this deep dive.
All right. I like it.
Think about it.
I will.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
You too.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.